All right. Hi, Vince and board and members. We are starting our special meeting here today. And we do not have a member comment period for this, so I'm going to just go ahead and let you kick it off, Vince.
And thank you, Krista. So good morning, everyone. Um, we're starting our agenda today. Got one business item I'd like to finish up. On the consent agenda, I'd like to get the minutes of the previous April 16th meeting approved. So I'm looking for a motion for that.
So moved.
Mark and Brian seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any objections or opposed? Hear none, we get started. Okay, we are gathered here this morning to discuss and to give some recommendations to general manager and staff about how they would like to proceed with the Decatur Island Solar Project. We'll get into the discussions today. I want to kick things off this morning. I want to start it, and I want to set some context, unless we have forgotten what's kind of bringing us to the need for developing local generation in the first place. So I'm going to share with you a segment of the comments I made to the county council yesterday. Justin was kind enough to invite me to come and speak for a little bit. So Foster and I had a short time in front of them. And so I'm going to read here what I said. So I'd like to leave you with a kind of state of things observation related to Washington State's energy strategy and the legislation that they put forward. This information is not available by casually reading the Seattle Times, and it's absolutely not available in local social or print media. It's buried deep in multiple obscure reports and websites and requires persistent digging to get to the nuggets. To it, I've accumulated over 2,000 documents and reports since 2018 related to these subjects. First, Washington has put itself on a very narrow ledge in stages. First came Initiative 937 in 2006, which required utilities to pursue conservation and eligible renewable energy. Then the Clean Energy Transformation Act in 2019, which committed Washington to eliminating fossil fuels from electrical generation, meeting a greenhouse gas neutral electricity standard by 2030, and reaching 100% clean electricity by 2045. Then the Climate Commitment Act in 2021 added a statewide cap and invest framework on top of already aggressive greenhouse gas limits. Second, the state's own planning assumptions imply a grid build-out of extraordinary scale. Commerce's 2024 utility planning report to the legislature shows raw electrical load arising from 10,000 average megawatts to over 12,000 in 10 years and doubling by 2050. And remember, that's average megawatts, not the nameplate capacity, which is much larger. This analysis did not include the potential for new demand for more data centers, nor EV charging at a scale that the Department of Transportation imagines in their report. All this assumes major additions of wind, solar, and other resources, sharply lower market purchases, continued adequacy only if all planned expansions are actually executed. Now convert that in infrastructure. At reasonable Northwest capacity factors covering that raw load growth would require something like 10,000 to 12,000 megawatts of combined wind and solar nameplate. To put that into context, 10,000 megawatts of combined wind and solar would need from up to 650,000 acres or 1,000 square miles, which is about 12 times the area of Seattle or 7 times the area of Portland. For perspective, current wind capacity is only about 800 megawatts in the wintertime. So this implies additions equal to many multiples of current capacity. Batteries do not create energy, they only store energy and return it later. So now add large amounts of storage and a great deal of new transmission on top of that. Washington State University conducted a report called the Least Conflict Columbia Plateau Siting. It did not find limitless area. Its final work pointed out to about 212,000 acres out of over 14 million, or just 1.5% that were suitable for solar and considered low conflict. This is not remotely the same thing as saying the siting problem is solved. Third, warning lights have been flashing for years. Western Electricity Coordinating Conference says variability, electrification, extreme weather, and aggressive clean energy targets remain significant resource adequacy risks in the West. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council's 2029 adequacy assessment says significant load growth and changing system dynamics are creating adequacy risks. E3 Consulting now projects the Pacific Northwest resource adequacy gap of roughly 9,000 megawatts in 2030 under its modeled assumptions. The Pacific Northwest Utility Conference Council says rising demand is pressuring utilities to add resources to keep the grid reliable, and BPA is still reforming grid access and managing large interconnection queues and transmission queues rather than actually delivering new transmission capacity. Fourth, the state's own 2024 Interagency Clean Energy Siting Coordinating Council report to the legislature is effectively an admission that the delivery system is not keeping up. The report says Washington will need continued planning, coordination, conflict resolution tools, and siting support to achieve the deployment needed for the state's greenhouse gas limits, CETA, and the energy strategy. In plain language, the state has not created a credible pathway to permit and build what its law requires. Frankly, the GMA, Growth Management Act, and the CETA CCA are in serious conflict, and the resolution does not appear forthcoming from the legislature. If you want one fact that shows how slow and cumbersome Washington's energy siting system has become, look at the EFSEC, that's the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. The Horse Heaven Wind Project has been in state EFAC process since February 8th of 2021 and is still not under construction, and it is headed to the Washington State Supreme Court. Badger Mountain Solar entered the process in October 2021, is paused. Watoma Solar entered on May 20th, 2022, and still in progress. This is not a serious pace for a state that claims urgency on climate and electrification. Fifth, the actual pace of build-out has been glacial compared with the scale of the mandate. Commerce's own report says favorable outlook depends on perfect execution of multiple assumptions, while Washington's broader public discussion has increasingly acknowledged slow growth, slow transmission expansion, and the difficulty of replacing reliable fossil-backed sources on schedule. Actual data from the Energy Information Agency shows that the net generating capacity in Washington State from 2019 through 2025 is an astonishing negative few hundred megawatts. There's ample evidence that energy projects run into roadblocks. Restrictive zoning, permitting barriers, tribal conflicts, environmental reviews, interconnection delay, and transmission siting fights. Washington's strategy depends on the scale of land-intensive renewable development and transmission that policymakers talk about far more easily than they can actually deliver. Whether or not one agrees, planning assumptions are being treated as if they were a guaranteed execution path. And this is the part that nobody in Olympia wants to say out loud. If Washington badly misses these build-out goals, the result is just not going to be a policy embarrassment. Means the state will likely see the worst of both worlds. Higher greenhouse gas emissions than promised because load keeps growing. The system will lean harder on natural gas, imports, and market purchases. Higher electric rates because scarce, dependable power, backup resources, and constrained transmission are expensive, and greater adequacy risk because demand can arrive much faster than wind farms, solar arrays, battery substations, and transmission lines can be permitted and built. At the same time, utilities should not count on the state relaxing the greenhouse gas goals soon enough to rest before planning. The goals remain official policy. State agencies are working to implement them, not abandoning them. Betting on legislative retreat is politically speculative and operationally irresponsible. The more realistic answer is this for utilities. We are left with a hard middle path. We need to build as much local capacity as is realistically developable, secure transmission rights and interconnections early, reduce exposure to markets rather than increase it because nobody knows what those markets will be as a deliverer of energy. Use storage, demand response, rooftop solar, and conservation as supplemental, not substitute, as utilities' own clean energy implementation plans over the next decade shows these collectively solving less than 2% of the problem. We need to be blunt with regulators and legislatures that goals without permits, financing, and realistic schedules are just hopes. What troubles me most is not just the policy gap, it's the awareness gap. I do not believe that state government, county governments, or the public have yet more than the vaguest notion of the scale of the problem now bearing down on us. We passed laws, adopted plans, written climate elements, and repeated ambitious goals, but that's not the same thing as securing actual electric supply, transmission, and infrastructure. To borrow from the music of the Music Man, we've got trouble right here in River City, and far too many people think the band can tune up later. So my request to the council is simple. Recognize electric power as essential infrastructure, work with Opalco as a planning partner, remove code and policy barriers that block local generation storage and grid facilities, and require an honest infrastructure analysis in the action plan supporting the comprehensive plan and climate element, and advocate at the state and federal level for permitting, transmission, and funding needs to keep the county reliable. Don't treat energy adequacy as somebody else's problem. If this county wants electrification, resilience, and climate compliance, then it must also make the infrastructure possible. Well, those are remarks I made to the council yesterday. And now I'd like to open up our discussion on the Decatur site. This time I'd like Foster to make some opening remarks.
Yeah, and you know what's amazing to me is kind of going through this process, and I think that our community is really evolving in a really meaningful way. So, I mean, a byproduct of this really challenging effort is going to be really solving everything that Vince just brought up, and we've been highlighting it for Vince, about the last 5 years, dealing with the council and saying, or various people on the council and saying, hey, our land use tables are old and outdated. They still look at it, our placement of generation like the old diesel generators, and they're not thinking about a passive option for us to move forward with, like solar. The county issues about 200-ish, I'm just guessing what it is, new residential building permits every year. Now, we have enough power today, but all that load growth, and think that year over year, is what we don't have. There's going to be times when we have extreme weather conditions that we don't have the power, but every year we get another 200 homes that we got to figure out how to serve. And it's a challenge for us. And it's a challenge because we need the county to act. And I think this county is actually, their ears are starting to open based on what Vince just said when we were, when Vince was given a really good overview about what the challenges are going to be going forward. And we need to work together as a community, because right now we don't have any options. I mean, the majority of our county is lined with trees. There's no question about it. But where can we actually build anything to combat renewable generation for solar? Very limited. We have the project that we're going to continue on over in Baylor Hill. It's agricultural. We got a lot of, we're going to resurrect that and really do a really good agricultural site. But it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of push to save agricultural land and not put solar on it. And I think we need to really do both in the same site. It'll be a good pilot for us. Other than that, there's not a lot of options for us. The majority of county is excluded from even doing a CUP on all the rest of the areas. Believe it or not, Decatur is one of the only ones that has a rural general use designation that's to it. And what does that mean? There's I think back in the day, somebody over on Decatur wanted to make sure that there was ability to build, because rural general use is pretty much the only location that it's utilized is over on Decatur. So look at the comprehensive plan. There's not a lot of a choice for us, but that's one of the options that the county allows us to build on. Rural farm forest, 0. And then the worst that I look at it is you can get a CUP for a forested area. And believe me, I don't think anyone around this room, anyone around in Zoom land, or anybody wants to see our trees leveled or cleared. But what do you do with all the trade-offs? I mean, when you have the landmass that we have is treated environment. And when we were doing the survey, what we were really trying to get to is, where do we want to prioritize? Where do we want to put it so we don't get into this frustration thing that we are in right now? And that's going to be the challenge for us to go forward. It wasn't, keep all trees at all costs. We realized that there's trade-offs. I mean, every time a new residential building permit is issued, there's more than a handful of trees that are going to be removed. Every time there's a new proposed project, there's more and more trees that are removed. But when we need to figure out how to replace the power, or at least plan for the power in the future, that's a different conundrum for us to face. And if anything, again, I think if there's a positive aspect of what we're going through, we got to figure it out. We got to figure it out together. And I think working together with Decatur at the beginning stages of this, I think it was productive trying to figure out the alternatives to make these things work. And I look at the public engagement process that we went through, I'll put that all on my shoulders. What we were trying to do is we were trying to get out in front of everything of saying, we don't want surprises. We want to make sure that we have that engagement. So we went over to Decatur Island and said, here's what's going on. Now, we didn't have the answers because we didn't have all the thoughts and all the project components flushed out, but we did listen. And I think if you go to our website and you look at the volumes of information, it's tremendous. I mean, we really are trying to figure out what kind of community benefits plan that we can come up with, what kind of questions and answers that we can respond with, so you understand our position and our challenges going forward. But I would say that everybody around in the PALCO boardroom, I know it's gotten really emotional, and that's good because we all care deeply about our island and our environment, and everything that we're here for is the beauty, and not one of us wants to see anything happen negatively to it. It's, we're struggling because we want to get reliable power, and we're starting to see it degrade. What do we do as a community? I think it's really apparent when we had our outage, last week, and we were kind of surprised by that. And I think that you start realizing that all of our commerce, other than the people that have the generators, stop. That's not going to be an acceptable situation for us. But I think one of the lessons learned that I know that I have is, wow, we need to make sure that there's a lot of member engagement, a lot of effort really put into everybody understanding the trade-off. So that's my takeaway. I know that that's an after the fact thought, and I apologize for that. But I hope that we keep our ears open. I know mine are, and really try to work together in the future so we can figure out how to navigate through this. There's going to be a point in time where outages are going to hit, just like Vince just went through. And when that happens, my expectation is that governmental grants are going to start flowing. And that's what we need to take advantage of, because our little co-op can't afford, a tremendous amount of generation without support. And so I hope that we can figure that out in the interim and really scale that up well, so we can protect all the things that are important to us, but still balance the reliability and essential services that we provide. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody for their engagement. And I really do want to say that we're not trying to frustrate anybody. We're really not. And it's really kind of sad when we do, because that's not anyone's intent. Anyway, with that, Vince, I'll kind of hand it back to you.
Thanks, Foster. All right, I want to open it up for our board discussion right now. But I want to play this thing is I'd like each individual board member, if they choose to do so, to make some comments or state a position on how they'd like to go. I'd like to call on Mark first.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for making the time. I know this is a special meeting and it's hard to make time for these things. I want to say that the board has seen all of the materials that you as members have sent, not only as groups, but individual comments. Nobody keeps member comment communications from us. And we've seen some allegations of that. The staff are incredibly diligent about forwarding everything you send to the board. You may doubt that because we as individuals didn't immediately respond and email back. But I think I want everybody to remember that we act as a board, not as individuals, right? What matters is what happens in these board meetings. And that's why we read everything, but we don't necessarily individually send off responses to everything. So I'd like to also make a comment that the impression that Thursday's board meeting was somehow supposed to be a vote. It was not our intent that board meeting was going to somehow become a vote on proceeding or not. We intended a board meeting where we cleared the calendar, and instead of talking about the usual topics that we do in a board meeting, we wanted to offer the people from Decatur and the rest of the membership an extended opportunity to speak and tell us what you think. That was the intent of Thursday's board meeting. Normal board meetings, as you're probably aware, have a short member comment period at the beginning. We wanted to arrange a meeting that was dedicated solely to member comment on this project. That's what Thursday was about. The decision that faces us today is really a staff request to clarify whether or not we should be pursuing the largest possible panel count for the project on Decatur, or which would require making a request to the county to change some land use designations, the natural growth area, or whether or not we should modify our plans and cut a few rows of panels, avoid the natural growth area. And that is what the board has been asked to consider at the moment while we're waiting for information from the hearing examiner. I know that many of you watching this are hoping that we have more in front of us, a go, no go decision of some kind. But I wanted to clarify what the actual question that we've been asked to give our opinion on is. And I will say on that question, I am not in favor of asking the county to modify the natural growth area. I don't believe it's necessary to have a viable project. I think we should respect the original boundaries of the natural growth area. And if that costs us a couple of rows of panels on a project, that is something that we should plan around and deal with. Otherwise, I am very interested to hear what the hearing examiner comes back with. I want to see the feedback from the planning department. These projects are never one decision to move forward. They are a myriad of decisions, and the project evolves in response to the feedback we get from the planning department, the feedback that we get from the public and the membership. And I want to see that feedback before any other decisions are made, personally. I want to also just finish up by saying that, you know, we, the board, we don't make these decisions in a vacuum, and we don't make these decisions without a framework. We have an integrated resource plan. You can read, it's right on our website. And the integrated resource plan is really the long-range plan that tries to address the problem that Vince outlined just a couple of minutes ago. And that integrated resource plan, it not only talks about our commitment to community solar and our commitment to facilitating and even financing member rooftop solar, but it talks about the exploratory work that we've done for almost a decade now on tidal power. And I know that some of you have evidenced some skepticism about our tidal project experiment, but that was not a hastily constructed project. It is the result of a decade worth of working with outside companies, Orbital Marine in Scotland, the efforts of people on the board like Jerry Whitfield, technical people on the staff, collaboration with Pacific Northwest National Laboratories, Department of Energy. These are projects that may or may not yield a financially viable, engineering viable solution, but they're the kind of explorations that we as a utility need to engage in to see if they can form part of a solution to the energy supply problem that Vince outlined earlier. I think that we do, and I think Brian's going to talk about this maybe a little bit. I do think that the original structure for pricing community solar shares from our original Decatur project can be improved upon to improve the economics for the members. As Brian has been pointing out in some of our discussions, community solar credits, which somehow tie in the rising cost of power from BPA, I think are going to be important to explore. And I think that you're going to hear more from us discussion-wise in the months and year, following this about how we can better structure the economics of these projects. I thank everybody for your comments and your participation. I know we may or may not agree on things, but I appreciate the fact that we are able to articulate our views and do it in a respectful manner. And I am committed to listening respectfully to your opinions going forward as we get feedback from the hearing examiner, et cetera. And I thank you all very much. Vince, hand
Thank
it
you,
back to you.
Mark. We call on Brian next, please.
Thank you. Just let you know I have to leave at 11 o'clock to get on the ferry.
Mhm.
So thank you for letting me go. I'm Brian Silverstein from District 3. I appreciate the people of Decatur who have shared their concerns by email and participating on our board meetings. I have read every email sent to the board and what's on the web. Energy to serve Apalco members is growing while BPA has assigned all of their low-cost energy is gone. We need more energy. Some will be on the mainland, but with the limit of the mainland cables, some must be in our county. At this time, it'll be solar and storage batteries. It could be others in the future. It should be spread around the county. It's good for our system. We are adding on Decatur now because the sites and cables are available and the county has allowed site use. Now, I understand that many people do not want to see energy facilities. Remember back before 1951, there are all generators around this county. We don't have that anymore. It has to be else. If it's not going to be here, it'll be somewhere else and someone else will see it, whether it's in another location, another island, or on the mainland. As just noticed, there was a good discussion about the cost of solar. I do think it makes sense. Apalco should develop a new credit rate design so members can participate in solar community. The credit should recognize the climbing cost of energy costs. After looking at the 5 options, I recommend number 2 with the existing NGA restrictions. It only reduces 7% of maximum production. And I thank all of you for participating.
Brian, thank you. Let's see, let me make on my thing here. Chooks, I'd like you please go next.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I want to start by just thanking everyone for taking the time to engage on this. The level of input has been significant, and I want to acknowledge that the board has received and reviewed the materials submitted. Staff has been diligent in making sure everyone is forwarded to us. So just like Mark had said, we may not have individually responded to each message, but that's because we operate as a board. We speak and act collectively through this process. So as I see it, the decision in front of us today is not a single go or not go on the project. It's more of a question of direction. Whether we pursue the largest possible build outs or whether we adjust the scope to reduce some of the friction we're seeing while still maintaining a viable project. So for me, that means planning around the existing natural growth area. I don't think modifying those covenants is necessary to achieve a meaningful outcome. Now, if that means giving up a number of panels, I'm comfortable with that trade-off. At the same time, I do think it's important that we retain enough of the project to preserve the low-income community solar component. That's a meaningful benefit, especially given the cost pressures many members are facing. And it should remain part of how we evaluate this. I also want to emphasize that we're still in this process. The conditional use permit, the hearing examiner, and the planner feedback are all important inputs. We're not making decisions in a vacuum, and we should continue to let that process inform how this evolves. So as we move forward, I am committed to continuing to listen respectfully to the community, especially as we receive feedback from the hearing examiner and others. That has to maintain central to how we operate. So I support moving forward in a way that avoids the natural growth area, preserves the low income component, and continues through the permitting process with those considerations in mind. And based on what we had been presented in front of us, that would be our option, the second option. So thanks everybody for being here. And just a quick note, I do need to step off in about 15 minutes for a previously scheduled commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chooks. Jerry, please next.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks for taking the time to spend some time with us this morning. I will not repeat everything that we've heard from Mark and others on the board so far, because there are a lot of different points to be brought out that I think are important for you to understand about your board, how we operate, and how we undertake developments and decisions like this. And I can assure you, first of all, that the quality of people that you have on this board, their backgrounds, their business expertise, their technical expertise, and the time that they have spent on Opalco business during their times on the board is really amazing. And don't think that we come into any of these issues lightly. Indeed, we do not. We read all our materials, we discuss it amongst ourselves. We may not even have real solutions to real problems, and we have to figure that out as we go along. So with regard to this particular topic, which is putting in an additional solar array on Decatur, I want to say, first of all, how we act as a board. First of all, the board works at the pleasure of the members. That is all of you out there that pay your bills every month, that you use electricity every day. And we serve at your pleasure. We are voted in by you. If you choose to give us our marching orders, you have the ability to do that through the ballot box. And then with regard to our general manager works at the pleasure of the board. So we're not dictated to by the general manager. We try and have as close and constructive a relationship with him as we can, but we are independent, and we often share independent views with him, and vice versa with him. So that's how we operate as a board. Now, when it comes down to this particular project, the problem we're trying to solve is a difficult problem, and it's one that we're not given any easy solutions. We have always bought all of our power from Bonneville Power Administration, which is a federal body that administers electric power from all the dams on the Columbia River. And as you know, there's a lot of controversy associated with that, and people that want to remove dams from the Columbia and from the Snake River. So we have to deal with those issues. We are at ground zero, if you like. This is where the whales habit. This is where salmon comes to then return up the rivers and hopefully survive. There are a lot of issues that we have to deal with. This is one that, to my mind, doesn't necessarily fully address the problem we have, which is adequate power resources in the future. As you all probably know, our peak demand, which is when we have the minimal amount of extra or available power, is during the winter, during darkness. Typically after dark in the evening, when we're all back home cooking, and again in the morning. And yes, at that time, solar is not generating. Now, solar plus storage can be made to supply power during those times. But as we all know, the cost of storage is prohibitively expensive at the moment. And also, as we even discovered this last week, it doesn't necessarily kick in exactly when and how we expect it to happen. But, it just shows that technology has to catch up and that the cost of the technology has to come down. So, whether I think this is a very valuable, viable project, I'm kind of on the fence on that because I'm not sure that even if we could vote and get all the panels we wanted for this particular project, it would necessarily make a huge difference. However, looking more towards the future, and if we can improve on this and put more sites to be available in the San Juan Islands, it's probably the best way to increase our ability to prevent blackouts and brownouts in the future. The other part of that is, where are the costs of our power going to go? Well, I hate to say it, but they're only going to go upwards, because if we can't supply additional power for the kind of growth that we're talking about, even the simple 200 panels, homes a year that are permitted, that's, it's 1.5% increase every year, plus other things which we're doing to convert from fossil fuels to electric power to hopefully reduce your overall energy bills and to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. That's what our call is, and that's what we're considering behind every one of these decisions. They're not easy, they're not straightforward, but we have to look at all aspects. So I would ask that you treat our decision-making process with respect, and that you listen and you read, and hopefully you'll come to pretty much the same kind of conclusions that we do come to. I've been a little bit perturbed by the way some people have been treating board members over this particular project, and particularly concerned for Tom, who lives out on Decatur, and I know he loves it there, but he's one of your members. When I look at are we serving membership properly, and I've heard anywhere from 70 to 80% of people that live on Decatur do not want this project to go ahead. Well, you could say, okay, we're only serving you as our members if we say no. In fact, there's a much wider choice of members and members' opinions throughout the whole of San Juan Island. So we've got to consider more than just the views of people on Decatur, and I hope you'll understand that. And we represent different islands. I represent Shore Island, which is the smallest individual island population-wise that is represented on this board. But the people of Shore are very much engaged in a lot of these projects, and they have their concerns and issues, and they've generally been very respectful. I would like to finish by just saying that I was very much encouraged yesterday after we received a memo from Decatur Island Alliance. I didn't know that Decatur Island Alliance existed and what it existed for. I dug a little bit and I found that a good old acquaintance of mine, Angela Christinger, was very much behind this. And we had a lovely conversation yesterday talking about what it is. And I was very much impressed with the approach that she wanted to take with this alliance. And hopefully you'll listen to her too, and use the methods and suggestions that she and her group are going to come up with. Well, thank you very much for your time here. I hope I've stimulated some further thought and discussion, and that you'll be pleased when we finally have an outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Wendy, please next.
Okay, thank you. And everyone else has said so many things that I also believe, but I don't want to repeat. I do want to repeat that I want to thank everyone for being here, and also that I have seen all of the materials that have been sent to the Opalco board and distributed by our staff. And in addition, I've also read the materials that have been published and the letters to our local media. So I have a position statement, and I wish I could speak completely freely, but I also want to kind of read some of what I wrote, because I tried to articulate my thoughts in a clear way. So as a board member, I believe my vote should reflect the opinions of District 2 members, aligning with Opalco's mission statement and the cooperative principles guiding all electric cooperatives. Opalco's mission statement says, Opalco serves our membership with safe, reliable, sustainable, and cost-effective essential utility services, committed to using renewable resources and reducing carbon emissions. For electric cooperatives, concern for community is the seventh principle, emphasizing the importance of sustainable development and well-being of the local area, rather than maximizing profit for outside shareholders. Because co-ops are member-owned, their commitment is to enhance local quality of life through policies approved by the members themselves. Opalco faces challenges in delivering reliable, sustainable, and cost-effective power in the foreseeable future due to growth within San Juan County, increasing demand for mainland power, and state mandates, primarily from the 2019 Clean Energy Transformation Act, or CETA. Opalco's Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, addresses these challenges with strategies aligned to CETA, including installing multiple solar arrays and batteries across the San Juan Islands. While these efforts match the mission statement, local solar projects must also demonstrate for the concern for the community in every respect. The staff has excelled at securing grants to reduce member power costs. For the Baylor Hill project, they secured a $1 million low-income solar grant from the Department of Commerce to lower power costs for low-income members. The grant was originally obtained for the Baylor Hill project, then transferred to the Decatur project. Although this grant shows concern for low-income community, it should not take precedent over its main responsibility to the members. I believe if Opalco's project timing prevents receiving this grant, other worthwhile Washington solar projects will receive the funding and deliver comparable benefits in greenhouse gas reduction and support for low-income residents. The Decatur project must adhere to county land use covenants and practices. I do not support any changes to the native growth area or other land use restrictions. Additionally, we cannot proceed until the San Juan County Hearing Examiner provides a decision on the Decatur project conditional use permit and SEPA. A major concern voiced by Decatur residents and Orcas Island members as well is clear-cutting a second growth forest to build a solar array. Having completed the Texas Master Naturalist program at Texas A&M in 2022, I'm personally unsupportive of removing the Decatur Area A forest when better sites exist for solar arrays in the San Juan Islands. The value of the Decatur Area A forest lies not only in the tree species, but in the ecosystem as a whole. I acknowledge other forested land is sometimes used for homes or structures where permitted, such as rural general use land on Decatur Island. However, our land is owned by Opalco members, and the views of Decatur community and other island members should guide decisions about development or preservation. I fully support community solar in the San Juan Islands. I look forward to progressing on the Baylor Hill project and initiatives on Orcas and the other ferry-served islands to advance renewable, resilient power for our future. I am not ready to vote because we haven't examined all options for the Decatur site, haven't heard from the hearing examiner, don't have a conditional use permit, the SEPA appeal remains unresolved, and we have not addressed all legitimate Decatur community concerns. Not having these pieces of critical information makes me believe that this board does not have sufficient information to make a sound, responsible decision on this matter at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And Tom?
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak and share some thoughts. And I certainly appreciate everybody attending today and spending time to focus on this really important project and discussion. I do want to address the feedback that the other board members have also mentioned about process and about how we act as a board and not individually. There's been a lot of public frustration, commentary, and feedback from opponents of the project who expected to see more interaction earlier in the process before the board had the opportunity to really gather all of the information necessary. I want to acknowledge that we received everything that everybody sends to the board. I think it was a really harmful comment to the contrary, that somehow that's not happening, and that's not accurate. We do see all the information, take it seriously. We all read it, study it, discuss it. There's been a lot of robust debate and discussion that's occurred with all the feedback. So that's important for everybody to rest assured that that feedback is received, studied, listened, and valued. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm glad that Jerry brought it up, is the Decatur Island Alliance. I felt early on when this project was proposed, given the size of Decatur and the initial commentary from the neighbors there and concerns that were raised very early on, that it would be appropriate to align with a group that was managed in such a way as to share all of those opinions, the feedback, have local discussion and debate so that Decatur could attempt to speak with one voice, or at least get as close as possible to a perspective they could communicate as a community consensus. I think DIA did a good job aiming in that direction. I think there's been some rough patches there in terms of some participants, but I think overall it's been really valuable for me as a director and neighbor and resident to participate with DIA. It's given me the chance to meet with neighbors, friends, folks in the community that I don't know that well, and really have an honest internal and local debate. So I want to shout out to the work that DIA has done. I've, as a board member, tried to really facilitate anything that the community has come up with in terms of opposition, concerns, questions. There's been tons of documents that have been created, thousands of hours have been invested in terms of position papers, and very professionally prepared and meaningful, detailed review and analysis of this. And so I want to thank a lot of the community members that have done that in a really professional and studious manner. And I've tried really hard to make sure that the board received that information, participated in meetings, responded to requests for one-on-one discussions, and also have encouraged the Opalco staff to be really receptive to folks coming over from Decatur in general and from DIA. So I think that's important to state that that has been a key part of this. I also wanted to comment a little bit about how I viewed the project when it was first proposed. When we were first aware of the opportunity to purchase this property, my mind went immediately not just to solar. I certainly understood the value of the site for solar generation and the efficiency electrically and technically in terms of being close to the existing array there and the substation and the submarine cables. That's got a lot of advantages from a very technical perspective. But I also was looking at the long game, looking at the 20, 30-year kind of forward-looking story here. And I think that needs to be reiterated a little bit. That is the landing point for our two current submarine cables. It's been very well communicated that we're running out of capability on those cables in the future in terms of our load growth and the age of the cables and maintaining our redundancy. So if one cable fails, that we can carry the county's load on another cable. Highly likely, it's a matter of time that we're going to need a third submarine cable, which is a huge heavy lift financially, and one that will have to be a collaboration with the BPA to accomplish that. So my viewpoint was that this property was really valuable to protect our future options to likely land a third submarine cable at this site, to handle any additional switchgear or integration of that power from the mainland that would be critical for reliability of power in the county. So that caught my attention. We would surround our existing array and substation with additional property. And I also wanted to see aesthetic improvement, to move the trucks, the storage, the spools of cable, and try to attempt to kind of undo the damage, so to speak, over the years in terms of just the aesthetic negative impact of this facility. So having some additional property there where we could move some of those materials out of sight was attractive to me. But the number one thing that I really thought was very important to consider is future implementation of storage. As other board members today have discussed, it is not a fully mature technology, but it is accelerating quickly in terms of its viability. If you look around the world at how much storage is being deployed and how big it is, it's a significant future technology that I think we want to have some space to embrace and connect to our network. I just think that's going to be so critical in the future. Can we afford it today? Absolutely not. Are we really ready to embrace a lot of storage implementation there today? No. But I think with the future third submarine cable, with additional solar generation that may occur elsewhere in the county, that we're going to want that. We want to have the space to do it. We also want to make sure that that's safe and aesthetically appropriate and environmentally stable. And there's a lot of different battery technologies that check those boxes. The Decatur residents have raised concerns about fire mitigation and fire risk, and that resonates with me. I think that's a really important point and has always been a risk at this location. Look how long that submarine cable infrastructure has been there at that location, the substation. So it's not just does Opalco's infrastructure and equipment potentially risk fire to Decatur in general or Decatur residents. It's also, is this critical infrastructure vulnerable to fires that start from Decatur folks or brush fires or whatever may happen that's human caused? Are we protected in terms of this critical choke point for the entire county with all of our power from the mainland coming through the site? So I do agree that there's some future mitigation mechanisms I think we should consider, and that's probably a more holistic county approach to how do we deal with vulnerability of all of the power infrastructure. So I'm very open to and have listened very closely and consistently to all the feedback and concerns of my neighbors and the local residents. It's pretty clear that they really don't want this project in any shape without any changes. I think it's really difficult in that the project itself, electrically, economically, technically, and for all the issues that Vince has consistently shared with us, he paints a pretty sobering picture, and I think it's all true. So I'm very conflicted in that the county in general really needs this generation. The members in general across the county also would benefit from the project, from the grant, and from all the benefits that have been stated and all the analysis that has been done by our excellent consultant team. So I'm really conflicted. I'm a neighbor, a resident. I have to look at this installation. I have to support my neighbors. And if I look at my duties to represent part of my district, which is just the Decatur part, I would really have to say that I would vote against the project at this point. I think it's premature to do so because, like everybody else, I do agree we should let this process play out. I think we need to hear from the hearing examiner. I can see participation with new board members that may come on. I think the county still has some dialogue that's really important to listen to. And as everyone has stated, we're not at a go, no go vote here. But as a representative of the Decatur part of my district, I'm thinking in a different direction and not as supportive of cutting the trees down and really clearing this property. That's a very difficult statement for me. I really think that it's important to recognize that all of these projects have significant compromises. There's no perfect site. It's very difficult in the county, as it has been stated. And the public engagement process, the term NIMBYism gets used a lot. I think sometimes it's a little disrespectful to folks, but it is a problem in terms of how do we as a county move ahead with this? And if there's not much county government interaction for energy policy, Opalco's left to shoulder this kind of on our own and muddle our way through this. So at this point, I just want to flag my feelings and pass along the pretty clear feedback from my neighbors and from the membership local to Decatur, and make a strong point about that it's just not something that they feel they should be asked to do a second time. They've already invested in the first microgrid system, and good for them. I think that's been admirable that they were willing to embrace that project. And a lot of them have invested in it and really supported it. But this second project, before we have the opportunity to implement something like this on some of the other islands, I think is really a difficult step for any of the folks to accept. So I wanted to speak more from the heart and not so much the statistics, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share this and for the participation of all the members. I would hope going forward that the process gets better. I don't know that anybody has the moral high ground. I think we all need to collaborate and really set aside some of the emotional side of it and focus on the details and collaboration. And there's room for improvement all the way around. And I'm committed to try to participate in that area and support really positive engagement and to not have the personal kind of conflicts, if you will. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that very much. Okay, given the urgencies of time here, I know we've got one board member who's left and Brian has got to go in 5 minutes or something like that. So I think we've had a lot of time to think about this. We've heard it. You heard everybody's statements. I'm looking for a motion up on the board here. The options presented will move forward based on the conditions of continued use permit and building permits. Staff is requesting the board make a motion to allow staff to adjust the scope of work based upon this. So remember, this is not approve or not disapprove the project. We're looking for what guidance do we want to give to the staff with respect to the options they have above there. So I'm looking for a motion from one of the board members as to how this vote should look. Brian? You're muted, Brian. How you doing, Brian? He seems to have some technical difficulties here.
Could we,
While we're waiting for Brian, Shooks is now on just momentarily if you want to grab his vote real
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
And maybe we can unmute Brian.
I tried.
I also tried.
How about Brian? Why don't you text Vince your?
Or Mark, would you like to make a motion?
So could we, Russell paused his screen sharing. Could we put back up the
Okay.
table of, yes, exactly. So
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Yes,
Chooks.
Chooks, great.
Okay.
Hang in there a moment.
I believe that I have heard most of the board members say that they do not favor modification of the NGA. And if that is correct, I would be making a motion that we direct staff to not pursue modification of the NGA and that we continue to wait for information from the hearing examiner, et cetera, which would correspond to option number 2 on the table listed, I believe.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? I think Brian is seconding that. Okay, any further discussion from the board members?
So I just want to add that option 5 also meets the criteria that Mark was just discussing. And it does not involve cutting down the trees on area A.
So is that a request for an friendly amendment to the motion?
Yes, please.
Mark?
I think the project isn't economically viable if we do that. So
your motion stands.
yes, my motion stands.
Brian, does your second still stand? Okay, I want to call for the vote then. So as the motion is basically to direct staff to consider option 2 as they move forward. And again, the future depends upon the results from the hearing examiner, any appeals and other requirements therefore. But at this point in time, for their planning purposes, option 2 is the favored one that the staff will consider. All in favor?
Aye.
You see Mark is an aye, Brian is an aye. I can't see anybody else, so I'm gonna have to poll everybody there. Jerry,
Yep, that's an
Tom,
aye.
Tom,
Hey,
Chooks,
Duke is also having trouble. There he goes.
Aye.
okay, Wendy,
Nay.
and Chair usually does not vote on these things, but also has the option to do it, and I vote aye. So what, no, did somebody can give me the numbers we got then there? I think it's like 4-2, 4-3, or 5-2.
Thought I heard 2 no votes from Wendy and Tom.
I
Is
have
that true?
5-2. 5-2.
Okay, so I have 5-2 on that, and that motion passes. So staff is directed to consider option 2 as we go forward.
Thank you very much, everybody. That was very good understanding and communication, and you really have our dedication to make sure that we carry forward this project. So we're going to be proud of it. We really are. And that's going to be my commitment to the community. So thank you.
Okay, if anybody any further closing comments? Okay, thank you all for that, and we see you at the annual meeting. Appreciate your work.
thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thank
Vince.
you.